This episode was originally a live conversation which took place at the Rise Up Summit in October 2023.
For us, the inspiration to develop Smart Sleeper was not necessarily to sleep better, it was to live better. The feeling of waking up and having power for the day, for having more energy, better health, more awareness, less stress.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Sylvan.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, great to see so many faces for this session. Quick introduction, my name is Sylvan. I'm the host of the Swisspreneur podcast, and we're a non-profit on a mission to develop and advance entrepreneurship. And every week we do podcasts like this with great guests to motivate more people to start their own businesses. And it's my pleasure to welcome Catarina today. You're the co-founder of Dagsmejan, a company that produces innovative sleepwear here in Switzerland, and we want to talk about your journey. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to everyone in here for joining the session.
So I want to start with your personal background first. You studied business administration, then you went on to work in the cosmetics industry, but at the same time you also lived in more than 7 countries across Europe and Asia. So I just wonder, how has this shaped, you as a personality to have this international background?
I think it really helps to realize that you need to have a curious mindset and keep an open mind and not make too many assumptions. I think also moving from continent, for example, I remember coming to Asia, what I really loved is this feeling of that it's still possible. Because sometimes when I was working in corporate in Europe, everyone's like, well, we tried that 20 years ago, it will never work. It's this mindset of not thinking that it's possible to think new and to do different things. And I really, really enjoy that. I think also working in those kind of environments made me realize also that it's important to have structure and process in an environment that is unstructured. I worked in some countries as well where all of a sudden legislation changed and we couldn't import products anymore. And I think the more uncertainty you have, the more important it is to be in control of what you're doing, because otherwise you're constantly firefighting. And whilst you're putting out this small fire here, the house is burning down behind your back.
You then did a little change. You were an executive marketing director for an international business school for 3 years before you started your own company. And I wonder, these many different things that you did, although it looks very different from the outside, what did all the projects and jobs that you had have in common? What did they teach you? What did you take away from that?
I think sometimes people put too much emphasis on which industry you're in or what particular company, because I think there's so much that ties all companies together. And for me, that is the focus on the customer. To be successful, you need to truly create real value for the customer and put that always at the front. And that's, I think, what ties it all together.
No matter if it's a person buying your cosmetic products or the students at your school.
Exactly, or someone needing sleepwear, I think you need to understand how you're building and giving real sustainable value for customers.
And then in 2016, you decided to take a leap of faith and start your own company. Where does that entrepreneurial drive come from? Was that always something that you wanted to do, or you had some role models around you that inspired you to start your own company?
It's something that grew, within the years. I've also had startup weekends with friends talking about the idea of starting a business together, but never really had that one idea for it. Also, obviously, when you're started your career already, it's quite a big step actually to step out. You put a lot at risk. You have costs already, rent, kids, whatever it might be, that are piling up, and it can be a bit deterring. But at the same time, I came in a spot where I was offered another job. I would have to move to London. I didn't want to do it anyways. And that's when we thought, okay, let's just take the time out now to really consider this for real and see if we can start something together. Yeah.
You mentioned, the living costs. That's probably one of the biggest changes you make, from going to a stable salary, a fixed income coming in every month. How did you handle that? Was that emotionally also challenging, or was that easier than expected for you?
Both, I would say. I mean, it is definitely having your own business. There are the moments when you wake up in the middle of the night thinking, I'm going to live under a bridge, I'm going to lose everything. I think that's just part of the journey, you know. At the same time, I also have to say downsizing for me in terms of, you know, expenditures you have, it was not as difficult as I thought it would be. It's okay for a time to buy less and you know, spend less. I think that was less difficult than I thought.
You probably also get used to it over time, I assume.
Yeah. And then you work so much you don't have time to spend anything anyway.
Exactly. A fun fact that maybe some people don't know from your story is that when you started Dagsmejan, you actually started with your life partner, with Andreas. Were you scared of going into business with your life partner as well and sort of betting everything on one card?
Yes, I mean, definitely it was also the consideration that if something goes wrong, it goes really wrong. But if it goes right, it also goes really right. For us, I think it was both the fact, I mean, the first moment we met, actually, we talked about that we both have had individually dreams of starting a business. Like the very first evening we met.
That's crazy.
So we both had those kind of thoughts, but we both had not found that great opportunity. We're also very complementary, actually. Sometimes also that can lead to friction, but we are quite different. We have different areas where we're very strong, and I think that really helps us as a couple as well.
Now I'm curious, how did you actually meet? Tell us the story of your first date or your first meeting.
I mean, we actually met in Bad Enge when it was a football game going on. So it was not so spectacular in that sense, but like I said, we started to talk, and we just had so much in common, and like I mentioned as well, actually started to talk about starting, you know, our dreams of entrepreneurship already on the first date. Yeah.
And what would you say is the biggest advantage of having a company with your life partner, and what is the biggest disadvantage of having that set up?
I think the biggest advantage is that you really understand each other, because it is such a special journey to be on, and to have someone by your side who understands the highs and the lows and understands why you on a holiday work 4 hours every day. You know what I mean? They really gets the obsession it becomes at a certain point. The disadvantage is, you know, you have an irritating discussion at work with that coworker you can't stand, and then you come home and he's sitting opposite you on the dining room table. It can also be a little bit like you really need to be able to separate between private and professional and really try to draw that line, and that's sometimes not so easy. Yeah.
Do you have any specific rules in place to help you to do that better?
I mean, we try to be really also clear that if we don't want to talk about, because there's a risk of always kind of sliding into business topics. So then if I feel I don't want to talk about business, then I really say, I would like to pause this discussion now and not talk about it. And then we respect that and we move forward. And I think that's important, to be able to pause and not push forward if the other person is not ready for it. And
how do you have to imagine that, you know, you come home from a busy day at the office and then you still just continue talking about the business 24/7 basically, or is there also a break of business time?
We definitely try to have a break as well. I mean, it is a passion as well. It's more than a job, you know, so it is a passion. So in that sense, we do talk about it, but obviously we have so much other things in common as well. We love being outside, out doing sports, travel. And I think it's important to also get inspiration from other things, because otherwise it's difficult. It's not to push through for a year or 2 years. It's a lifestyle, and it should still be fun. Otherwise you're not going to make it, actually.
Before you mentioned that you wanted to start a company, had this desire in you, but there was no perfect idea yet. So how did you come up with the Dagsmejan idea? Why did you decide to focus on sleep?
So we actually sat down and really started to think about, if we were to do something, what would it be? And then, so what are we passionate about? Where do we think we can add something? And what are the mega trends? And then we're both very interested in health and wellness and well-being. And then we kind of came on to sleep as a topic that is so important and was rising in awareness. And because we both have been doing quite a lot of sports, we've seen what happened in sports, where in terms of understanding how fiber technologies and construction can really make an impact. But nothing had happened in sleep. So that was really what led us to think, why don't we take this category that had no innovation for 50 years and see if we can actually bring function into this category and improve on the way we sleep.
But still, that is a very big area, right? You can improve the mattresses, you can improve the pillows. You decided to go for pajamas. Why was that?
Because a lot of the other areas, there's happened so much already, actually. And there's so much happening in mattresses in already like 20 years ago. Sleep trackers, pillows, it was really dense market and with so much innovation already. Whereas there was this space where nothing had happened. So that's why we thought, okay, this is the one opportunity within the sleep space where we could make a difference and really bring real innovation.
And how do you then go about that? You had the idea, you knew the market that you wanted to tackle, but then you still needed to develop and actually have a product to sell. How did you go about developing that?
So neither I nor Andreas have any experience with sleep or textiles. So that was a slight challenge, let's put it like that. So for us, it was very important to be scientifically founded. So we contacted EMPA, actually, which is an institution here in Switzerland for research in materials and technologies. They actually proposed to us to do an InnoSwiss project, which means it's a federally funded research project. So we started one with EMPA and with the HSLU, and also a professor at the Stockholm University, to establish our physiological sleep needs and how we could meet those with the materials and the sleepwear. And then the second one was also broadening on that with different construction techniques and different collections. So we really sought to make sure that all of our claims are scientifically verified, backed, and it really makes a difference.
And what were some of these results then? Did you see, hey, if you use our pajamas, your sleep gets 50% better, or how did you then validate that idea?
So, I mean, the first step was to really understand what even makes a difference. And that's where we really honed in on temperature. And not everyone is aware, but temperature has a massive impact on our sleep quality and duration. To fall asleep, our core temperature needs to drop. And to stay asleep, it actually needs to remain at a lower level. But a lot of people get hot and cold at night or hot at night, and this really disturbs our sleep quality. So based on that, we developed 3 collections. That is, one is for if you're hot and cold at night, one is if you're hot at night, and one if you tend more to be cold at night. Then we also established that for athletes, it's particularly important to sleep well, but also to optimize your muscle recovery. So we developed a recovery collection, which has a mineral print that helps, that reflects back infrared energy that helps to oxygenate the muscles. We tested through torso testing, lab testing, also in climate chambers, to really ensure that the fabrics are, supremely breathable, are moisture wicking, but also helps to cool down through evaporative cooling. I really tested each claim. And also, depending on the collection, we're also working with different institutions as well to test.
This sounds like, a lot of work to get to that level and to have all the scientific background. Were you already working full-time on Dagsmejan while doing that, or did you still have other income sources? Because while developing that, there was literally no revenue coming in, right?
Yes, so I started to work full-time before Andreas, actually. That helps to have one income. It is difficult otherwise, because it does take long, and it takes a lot longer than you think, I would say, in general. So there are always going to be challenges along the way. Things didn't pan out the way we hoped, and then we had to start production all over again and so forth. So for sure, that's important, yes.
How long did that development process take for you? When you say it takes longer than you think, what was your initial expectation? How long did it actually take?
We founded Dagsmejan in 2016. I started to work on it actually before that even. We launched a Kickstarter campaign in 2017, and we actually had the products in our warehouse in 2018. That was at the very least 6 months later than expected because of some production delays. And also, when you're a small business, you're not exactly on top of the list for your manufacturing partners, so they will bump you down quite easily. Yeah.
But still, for a physical product, into developing it and then actually having it produced, that's not, that long time, actually.
No, for really, really changing something and starting from scratch, it does take some time. But obviously it's frustrating because by then we were both working full time with it. You're expecting to be able to really sell and to ship the products. And then when you have a 6 month delay, and we lost kind of like the winter season. I remember this very clearly because the fabric was 3 weeks delayed to our garment maker. And then the garment said, well, now you lost your production slot. We can deliver in February instead of in October. I'm like, okay. And we have 50% of our turnover in the fourth quarter. So losing the fourth quarter was just massive. Like I was like first begging, then screaming, and then just almost crying. You know, it was so frustrating. Yeah.
How did you go through that and didn't give up along the way? Because there were many obstacles. That was just one example. But what kept you going? Why didn't you say, hey, maybe it's just all too difficult and too hard? Let's go back to our jobs.
What always kept me going was really that I was so certain that there was a need for innovation in this segment, and that it could make a difference, that we were able to deliver that. I was not always 100% sure, but I was 100% sure that it was a valid idea. Mm-hmm. After we launched, what really keeps me going also is, you know, every time someone makes a product review, it triggers an email to my own personal email, and I read every single product review because I think it's so important to see how people are experiencing your product. And this is what keeps me going. You know, the positive feedback we're getting, the customer loyalty, that's the most important.
Amazing. And I can imagine people also wonder, where does the name Dagsmejan come from? Does it have a specific meaning that you want to transport with your brand?
Yes, so it's a Swedish word. Dag means day, and mejan is a Nordic word for power. So it means power for the day. And for us, the inspiration to develop Smart Sleeper was not necessarily to sleep better, it was to live better. The feeling of waking up and having power for the day, for having more energy, better health, more awareness, less stress, and that's the inspiration.
I like that. And let's also talk, since you're a sleep expert, let's talk about the quality of sleep and what actually affects it. You mentioned temperature is one important part. What other distracting or negative factors do we have that sort of harm our sleep and don't give us the power for the day?
I mean, there are a multitude of factors. One big thing is stress, for example, which also as startup entrepreneurs can really be very detrimental to sleep. And the less we sleep, the more prone we are to be stressed. And the more stressed we are, the more prone we are to sleep poorly. So this can be this sleep stress cycle. Then there are other factors like food, for example. If you have a heavy meal, you will sleep poorly. Exercise, important. Alcohol, obviously. Also our habits, like are we on the computer just before going to bed? Are we, on seeing like this blue light that prevents the melatonin to develop and so forth? So there are many different factors.
And there's also a controversy going on. Sometimes, how many hours of sleep do we humans actually need? What's your take or best recommendation on that?
I mean, our sleep experts recommend 7 to 9 hours. So it depends really from a personal basis, what's really your requirement. But less than 7 hours would not be advisable.
But what's your personal number? How many hours feel right?
I like to try to get 8 hours, but it's not always possible. Yeah.
That's the start of life.
Yeah.
So we also want to talk about building a B2C brand as you did and expanding. So the first question from my side is, you built a B2C brand, but you're located here in Switzerland, which is by nature a rather small market. Why is it still the right place for you to have your headquarters here?
So I think Switzerland was very good for us in the beginning. Also, like I said, it has a big innovation support. So I think that for us was very important as a brand and as a business. Also, the startup support, I think, is actually very good in Switzerland. We decided from the get-go to be a global business, and it's very possible to be a global business regardless of where you're located. The only challenge is that you should have a warehouse outside of Switzerland, because otherwise the customs part is quite tricky. So we started with a warehouse in the EU space, and actually the first 6 months we had the warehouse in our own living room for Switzerland.
Classic,
not anymore. With that, I think it actually doesn't matter where you are in that sense. What I think is still good about having a small market as your foundation is that we are able to build a brand awareness maybe quicker. There is support in the market. There's a pride and an interest in Swiss brands in Switzerland.
So you went on a global scale very early on. How do you validate and actually test a new market to launch in? I imagine that to be quite difficult.
Yes, I mean, we have a global distribution, but we only focus at the moment on 4 markets, really, really focus. And that's Switzerland, Germany, US, and UK. But we have then customers in Singapore, Uruguay, Saudi Arabia, countries across the world, actually 100 countries across the world. They find us primarily through SEO because we're ranking very high on certain key niche keywords, like, for example, the world's most comfortable pajamas, or merino wool pajamas, or temperature regulating pajamas. And if you add up all of the search volume for those keywords, it still is enough. So people are actually finding us in that sense. But the biggest volume comes from our core markets. And our validation of which was be our core markets were, it had to have a high percentage of online sales. I don't know exactly now, but for example, Italy has quite a low share. I think when we looked, it was like 5% of apparel was sold through digital channels, whereas you have 20% in the US and the UK, for example. So are people used to buying online? Then also, what is the temperature in the market, obviously, but also what kind of sleepwear do people normally buy in those markets? Some markets are very lingerie oriented. It's a bit more difficult for us to get in there then. So based on that, we decided on those 4 markets, also based on the fact that with that we can serve them with 2 languages, English and German.
And for example, when you take the US market, obviously, it's huge to sell into that market, which makes it very attractive. But how did you then go about and sort of test? Did you run some social media advertising? Did you focus on SEO from the get-go? Or what was your strategy to build some initial traction and basically launch your brand in the US market without being physically there yourself?
So we had both the earned media angle, which helps from the SEO as well, because it builds backlinks, which increases your domain rating. And then we work a lot. Still social media is a really big channel for us. In the beginning, it was like 80% of our customer acquisition was through social media. Unfortunately, it's much more expensive today than it was even when we started a couple of years ago. But this was really, really great for us because we can work with video material and really tell the story. It's beyond the picture of, do you want a pink pajama? It's about what are the benefits, why should you buy it, what can it do for you? And through social media, you have the opportunity to tell that story directly to the customer in a different way.
Got it.
So that was very important for us.
Yeah. And when you actually go international, you go abroad, how do you decide what you keep in Switzerland, what you absolutely don't want to give up here, like, for example, the design or anything of that sort, and what do you want to bring to the local market because you have to adapt to the different conditions in that specific market?
You mean in terms of the communication or?
Communication, but also the setup overall. You say you need a warehouse, for example, or I need a different branding there or different communication. What do you want to keep in Switzerland? What do you want to bring abroad?
We have now, in the beginning we had 2 different warehouses. We have actually now only 1 warehouse because we manage, so in Germany, also shipping into Switzerland. Okay. Because as a clothing brand, we have so many SKUs that we can actually half our inventory by doing that. So as much as possible, we try to not make it too specific to the market unless there's a specific need. Of course, for example, in Switzerland, we do a lot of activities that we don't do outside of Switzerland. We are also the official sponsors for the Swiss national ice hockey team. So they're wearing our sleepwear when they're playing. This is a big story for us in Switzerland. People in other markets don't care as much about that, for example. So there are things like that where we're making specific efforts in one particular market. Also, what we learned is, for example, we have a PR agency in the US, and we were like very European, like, yeah, we think that you could sleep better if you try our pajama. And they're like, the world's most comfortable sleepwear. Okay, so now we're the world's most comfortable sleepwear. It's like you have to really be out there and not be too toned down. Depending on like I said, it's depending on the market. Yeah.
I imagine that same tagline would probably not work as well here in Switzerland, right? Yeah. So this is really the local market adaptation. Then another question that comes to mind, you mentioned, social media marketing, which got more expensive, but it still was or still is an important part. How do you differentiate between the efforts you want to put into branding of more, building the brand awareness that people recognize you as a brand versus direct performance marketing, which generates revenue? Do you have like a split of where you spend time but also money on these different activities?
We focus primarily on conversion, performance marketing actually, because brand marketing is super expensive and it's very difficult to track. So we do very few activities that are completely untrackable. So for example, print advertising or posters or whatever, we do extremely little of that. But of course, also something that is a performance marketing is also a brand marketing in the end of the day. So a lot of the times they are coming together, but we focus heavily on performance. Actually.
And which channels work well for you these days? Like social media got more expensive. Is it still the top performing one, or you have others that are better?
It is still actually, so we do, for example, a post-purchase survey, so we can see what people are saying, where they heard about our brand. Now, this differs from market to market a bit, but in Switzerland, it is still social media actually that is the highest. Then we also have regular media, so we also do PR, but we also work with sponsored articles. Then I'm really happy to say that actually in Switzerland and in Germany, 20% of our customers say they heard about us through a personal recommendation. So a friend or something like that has personally recommended the product. Obviously, this is very important for us and a very, very positive aspect. Then we work also on Google search. We do all of the different channels. Yeah.
And social media, you also have different platforms there to choose from. Which one is the best one for you right now?
So still Instagram and Facebook are still by far for us the biggest channels. And different, actually from market to market, it's a bit different if their Instagram or Facebook is the biggest. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about sustainability. That's another key aspect of your product. At the same time, this can also be a challenge because the supply chain can be complex. It can be difficult to control all the processes if you have partners that you work with. First of all, why is sustainability important to you as a brand, as a company? And how do you make sure that your suppliers and your partners actually enforce it?
I think that what is really, for us, it was very important to be scientifically proven and to be natural and sustainable in what we're doing, to be proud of what we're doing, actually. I think apparel is one of the biggest polluters, actually, out there. So it is so important to make a change and a shift in that. The challenges with it is obviously also the cost. It is much more expensive to produce sustainable products, and people need to be willing to pay the price for that, basically. So that can be a challenge. Also, yes, the lead times can be longer. For example, with one of our collections that we have merino wool, we only work actually with 2 farms in Uruguay, with the sheep from those 2 farms in Uruguay that are certified from the whole way. So we work with for that particular yarn, we work with the Nativa certification, which certified that how well the sheep are kept on the farm, but also the whole from the combing of the merino wool to the spinning of the yarn, to the knitting and dyeing, through the final garment making, that both the sustainability but also the ethical aspect, so that everyone is getting a fair salary, there are good work environments and good work conditions. So we work with different certifications, as well as working super close with our suppliers. And we decided to have the 100% of the processing, so the actual manufacturing, in Europe, because for us as a small brand, it's much easier to make sure that it is good working conditions.
And have you also noticed a shift in terms of customer demand to be a sustainable company, to offer sustainable products when marketing?
I think so, yes, but it's quite interesting. We also ask our customers why you buy our products. So, like I said, we had these customer reviews, and as part of that, we asked, why did you buy Dagsmejan? And you can choose multiple reasons. And many people choose the natural fibers, but not so many sustainable. Actually, more women than men. I don't know, maybe it's a coincidence. But I think, yes, there is, but I think also it's difficult to understand what it means to be sustainable today. There are so many brands that are just greenwashing, and what does it actually mean? What does this certification mean? What is sustainable, And I think consumers are often a little bit confused about it. I think for our customers, it is still important, but I think in the general market, it would be good to have more valid certifications and more understandable certifications. And I think also people need to kind of accept that if you want to buy sustainable products, it is at this higher price.
Yeah, that's what I sometimes feel when I talk to other entrepreneurs. They say people say they want sustainable clothes, but at the end, they still want to buy and purchase the cheapest product.
Yeah.
It sort of doesn't add up sometimes.
Yeah.
The last challenge I want to talk to you about is external factors. And external factors meaning having impact on your business. We had COVID in 2020. It's sort of coming back now in fall, unfortunately. We have wars that broke out in Ukraine, now also in the Middle East. How does that affect your business by sort of having something that can sort of completely change the world from today to tomorrow? How does that affect you?
I think in the last couple of years, there's been so many different things that happen that are kind of crazy and out of control. Some of it has impacted us positively. I mean, COVID for us was, for example, good. I'm almost sad to say it, almost embarrassed to admit it, but actually for us, it boosted our sales. But also we didn't have, as we don't have production in Asia, was also not a problem for us at all. But the war, for example, has also led to some increases in energy prices, which then leads to increase in raw material, which means other increases and so forth, which are difficult to handle and difficult to manage. We are also impacted a lot by weather, which people might not naturally understand, but there's a direct correlation between the weather and our sales, actually, from a day-to-day basis, because we have these temperature regulating sleeper, right? So in the summer, we sell our Stay Cool collection extremely well, but then if you have all of a sudden end of July, like it's temperature drops, our sales just tank. And it's it's difficult to work around because I can't change the weather, right? So those factors are difficult. We try to be as adaptive as possible and try to be as agile as possible.
How do you make sure that then you can actually make the necessary changes? Because these changes might be required immediately, like without any warning, and the world looks completely different, and also your business. How do you, stay on top of things to make sure that you actually make the right decisions when needed?
So on the supplier side, I think it's important to try to build out a supplier network, and we try to also have it in a bit different parts of Europe, for example, that be more or less impacted. Also gives a better negotiation power when you have more suppliers, then you're not so just having to accept whatever conditions that come your way. In terms of things like, the weather, for example, or when there's less consumer appetite to buy, our realization is to not even try to push when there's not an appetite. So we really try to scale back, and that's the benefit of the performance marketing channels. You can actually from one day to another dramatically reduce spend, and then when the appetite goes up, we increase again. So we try to really be very much in sync, so not to work against the trend, but actually with it.
So it's also a bit like with good sleep, you want to be resilient as a company to be able to manage whatever gets thrown your way. Yeah. Now, if you look at where you stand today, what are some of the milestones that you achieved together with your team that you are most proud of?
We talked a bit about it earlier, but the international presence. So we have customers in 100 countries across the world. We have over 100,000 customers, and we have average rating of 4.8 out of 5. So I think this customer feedback for me is the most important and what we're the most proud of. But of course, there's also other milestones like having 4 collections, starting with just 1, and now being able to really expand on that. I think it was 2.5, 3 years ago, we moved into our own real office. Before we had a co-sharing space, own real office in the heart of Zurich. That's also a real milestone. And this year we had pop-up stores before. This year we open up our own permanent store also in Zurich. There are things like that really still fills the whole team with pride.
And you're a real hidden champion, so to speak. So I'm really glad that we can share your story today. What have you planned for the future? What can people expect and probably see from you and Dagsmejan in the near future?
So we're continuously looking at what are the different sleep needs and how can we address those. So next year we have also a couple of new innovations and collections lined up. So that will be very, very exciting. We very much look forward to that. And we're always looking for new ways we see ourselves more as the better sleep company than an apparel company. So also maybe keep an eye open for some things in a wider space.
Fantastic. So to wrap up the conversation today, I have some rapid fire questions for you. Yeah. Just a 1-sentence answer or different options to choose from to, kind of find a summary here. Please describe your life partner, but also co-founder Andreas in 1 word.
Passionate.
Nice. What's your favorite Dagsmejan item?
Depending on season, I would say now stay warm.
Nice.
Yeah.
We talked about how many hours of sleep you need, but what's the ideal bedtime for you?
10 o'clock, I'm early in bed.
That's good. Do you remember your dreams?
Most of the time not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last one, when will you and Andreas get married?
We are getting married next year in August. Then we've been together for 10 years, so why not?
Amazing. Congrats on that. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.